Hi, my name is Reverend J. Lee Hill Jr. I'm the minister with children, youth, and young adults here at the Riverside Church in New York City. I have served in this congregation for just about 4 years now. I am a graduate of Wake Forest University Divinity School, as well as George Mason University, where I received my bachelor's degree, and the Howard University School of Divinity, where I received a certificate in biblical studies. I've been in ministry now for a little over a decade, and most of that ministry has primarily consisted of a preaching ministry as well as ministry with an age division, specifically with youth, young adults, and now with children.
So give a short bio of the church.
So Riverside Church has been here since the late 1930s, or early 1930s rather, late 20s. The church was founded by Harry Emerson Fosdick, who was known primarily for establishing a very liberal, progressive theology in the late 20s. A famous sermon that he preached here at Riverside, or not at Riverside, but at his former congregation before Riverside was built, is entitled, "Shall the Fundamentalists Win?" Our church was built with a vision that he and John D. Rockefeller had to establish a interdenominational, interracial, international congregation here in the Morningside Heights, Harlem area. Since the late 1920s, Riverside has been a beacon of light here in this area, not only for New York City, but also for the world in terms of our witness for social justice and our outreach into the communities. On staff here at Riverside, we have 4 clergy persons that serve. Our staff is a little diminished right now in these days. We typically have a much larger staff. We are without a senior minister, and Dr. James Alexander Forbes Jr. serves actively as our senior minister emeritus.
So explain how Columbia got into the whole equation with Riverside and why it was needed.
So Columbia has always maintained a very good partnership with Riverside Church. Columbia actually utilizes part of our building and has historically done that in terms of allowing or renting space out to our theater department. And so, in that perspective, Columbia has always, for a very long time, maintained a relationship. Even in the early years of the church, there's always been a strong collaborative partnership ministry that has happened and extended to the students not only at Columbia, but also at Barnard College and certainly at Union Theological Seminary. As of recently, however, Columbia now rents several spaces in our church in the tower portion of the building. And so that space has been rented out by the church for Columbia's use for various departments and ministries or various departments that they are serving.
So explain also what's been happening like with Union and other church buildings in the area that they've not using the space in.
Right. So one of the things that's happened currently is that Columbia is occupying space in the church, but those floors remain absolutely vacant. And so it's this idea that Columbia is in the space renting out floors from the church that we as clergy folks here and as members of the church are unable to utilize because they are now owned in part or rented in this way by Columbia, but the space is not being used by anyone. It is an empty space, and I think you'll be able to see that in a little bit later in the videotape.
So explain anything you know about Columbia and Union Theological Seminary.
Say more about in terms of their
Anything.
relationship with Riverside, or
Well, no, it's in terms of Columbia and Union, how they occupy Union as well. Anything.
Well, Columbia University is Union Theological Seminary is a part of Columbia University now, and so in terms of Columbia University is broken off now into Barnard College, as well as Columbia University, as well as Union Theological Seminary. The Jewish Theological Seminary has also an affiliate relationship with Columbia. Teachers College always has been there, but even newly acquired for Columbia is New York Theological Seminary, and this is a new relationship that has been built between the libraries now, so that New York Theological Seminary, which has always been an independent biblical seminary here in the city of New York, now has their library housed within Columbia University's library. So perhaps there may be another way that Columbia is reaching further into the academic life that's here on this academic acropolis, and acquiring New York Theological Seminary perhaps in the years to come.
And how would Columbia affect just like a day-to-day, like in the church, how you would see them or anything?
Right.
Just that.
Well, one of the ways that we see them most actively is certainly in the theater. Columbia, during their academic year of the fall and spring semesters, those 9 months, they occupy our Riverside Theater. And so in terms of their staging, in terms of their productions, they are in those spaces. Other ways that Columbia has interacted with Riverside has been in the rental of our nave. Our sanctuary is rented out to Columbia to house their graduation ceremonies, which they have no space that they can actually accommodate the numbers of students that they have. And so every year in May, part of our nave is rented out to Columbia so that their graduations can happen. And that's graduations that are typically for their teachers' college, typically is held here, and some of the other academic or not undergraduate but graduate programs, their commencement ceremonies and convocations are held here.
Do you see this as positive or negative, or how it will change?
Well, I see it as very challenging. On the one hand, I understand the need for Columbia to begin to develop partnership and to utilize space that's around, and it is of benefit to the Riverside Church in that there becomes another stream of income for our congregation and for the ministries of our church to happen. However, I also have another perspective, and that is as a clergy person and even as a member of this church, in that when it's time for us to look for space to do various programmatic ministries that happen here or to hold ministry events here, it becomes difficult because our space is not available for us as ministries and as clergy here of the church to actually hold programs, because those spaces are now, for better sake, owned by the Riverside or owned by Columbia University, if only for the 4 to 6 year period that the contract for the rent has been established.
Well, how do you think is going to change, if at all?
Well, I don't know. As those contracts come to close in the next couple of years, I think that there has to be an evaluation process that happens here at Riverside to determine whether or not it's good. It's been a good relationship for us to have, in terms of us not being able to have programs and ministries of the church to happen, and for Columbia to occupy those spaces and give cash offering as a way of supplementing the space that they own. Hopefully in the future that there will not be a need for us to even rent out space to the church, but I don't know how that plays out in the future. But it is my great hope that the space that has been established when the founding and building of this congregation happened in the late 1920s and early 30s is able to be lived out in a more fulsome way without Columbia University owning space within the church.
And anything else you want to add for closing?
I as a resident of this neighborhood,